Good evening, welcome. This is going to be the prenatal, perinatal, and postnatal care phase of the Joyful Belly program. My name is Mary Thompson, and I'll be presenting this evening. And here I am again, Mary Thompson. So we'll start off with the question, why study pre, peri, and postnatal care? I think the easiest answer is because it's important. Because this is a very crucial time of life for the new being, and it's an important time of life for the mother. So we want to understand the changes that go on physiologically and how to support the body in bringing this new life to fruition in the most healthful way possible. We could look at conception and pregnancy and childbirth as one of the most exciting and life-changing times in a woman's life. And I would wholeheartedly agree. The body changes, the mind changes, the dharma changes. I consider parenthood to supersede whatever the dharma is. The hormones of motherhood command care for the infant. They command attachment. And as the child's life goes on, that attachment lessens and the mother becomes more involved in her other dharmic duties. Dharma being that, what are we here to do? What's our spiritual duty? And when we take on the dharma of parenthood, that becomes our spiritual duty. The body, of course, goes through tremendous changes throughout pregnancy. They actually begin 2 weeks earlier as the body's preparing for pregnancy, 2 weeks before the onset of pregnancy, as the body begins preparing for the impending pregnancy. Then, over the course of just 9 short months, we get a tremendous shift in the mother's body that's driven by hormones, and an amazing shift that's going to occur between a single cell, 2 single cells, the egg and the sperm, that then become multi-celled, that then become a full-form baby, which is amazing. Childbirth is both thrilling and scary for many. There's the thrill of knowing that there is a child developing. There's the thrill of, I don't know, I think thrill has a little bit of fear with it, of what's this going to be like? What am I going to be like as a parent? What's this child going to be like? What if I don't like them? What if something's wrong? So there's thrilling is kind of being on that razor's edge of emotion. The scary part is some of the things I mentioned. A lot of people are willing to share scary birth stories. And so for many first-time mothers, they can be a little bit shell-shocked and terrified about what is childbirth going to be like. There's also the scare of thinking, what if something's wrong? What if I do something wrong? What if something happens to the baby? So that's kind of driven by hormones but also by the nervous system. Becoming a parent is an awesome responsibility. Here it says the child's health starts in the womb, and Ayurveda would go back even further than that. And so the child's health begins in the egg health and the sperm health. If we have optimal health in the egg and sperm, we have the better opportunity for health in the fetus. Now, once that fertilized egg finds a home in the uterus, now it can be impacted by the mother's choices. And now we can really start to see that Vikriti move into place. So the child's health is impacted by the time it has in utero. For many, pregnancy is the first time in life where they think about eating organically to make sure the little baby is as perfect as possible. And I would expand on this. I find it amazing that pregnancy is the first time in life when people start to question whether or not they should be drinking that much alcohol or whether or not they should be smoking those cigarettes. I often see newly pregnant moms putting aside their vices for the health of the child. So it's not just switching from traditionally raised food, like not even traditionally, but standard agriculturally raised foods to more organic foods to make sure the child has the best start in life. But they also set aside some of their poor choices to make sure that the child can be born healthy with the greatest opportunity for the life that is ahead. So this goes to the question of why we study this, because we want to be able to make recommendations to our client so that they can truly support their offspring in having the best start possible. Ayurveda offers special insights on this very unique season of life. As a health counselor, you're not solely responsible for the health of the mother, but you also take on responsibility for the health of the baby. When we support new moms in preparing for pregnancy well and nurturing that pregnancy as it goes on and taking care during the postnatal period, we support the mother's health as we go in through the process of accumulation, aggravation, alleviation. Accumulation, what do we do before pregnancy? Aggravation, how do we behave during pregnancy to minimize symptoms? And after pregnancy, in alleviation, how do we recover the body? How do we get back to that place that we were in perfect health before we became pregnant? As far as during the pregnancy, we make recommendations to support excellent nourishment getting to the fetus for its full development. So the Ayurvedic health counselor, in making those dietary and lifestyle recommendations, are supporting the health of both the mother and the child. So it's a really unique opportunity we have to work with two clients at the same time with the same recommendations. What you'll learn in this section is how to prepare your body and increase the likelihood for conception, or how to advise your clients to do so. We'll also talk about some common imbalances that a woman may have during pregnancy and during postpartum. There are definitely dietary and lifestyle approaches that will minimize the likelihood of the onset of these types of symptoms, and they can be put into place to uproot their cause so that we no longer have to deal with or suffer from these kinds of symptoms. We'll be looking at these from the natural Ayurvedic perspective that uses our foods, our food habits, our sleep habits, our energy habits through the course of the day, our 5 sense therapies, our daily routines. All of these can be used to generate health. We do it in people who aren't pregnant, and it's especially important to do it with women who are. So we're looking at the diet, the lifestyle, and we'll even look at some herbal recommendations for self-care and talk about some herbs that may be safe to use while preparing for pregnancy, what herbs may be safe to use during pregnancy, and then what herbal treatments might you use to recover the body and to kind of start the child's life off as well as it can be. We start this section with talking about how to prepare for conception. And what I like to remind everybody is that preparing for conception involves two people. Both the mother and the father have to consider how they can have the highest quality dhatus, especially shukra dhatu. So they have optimal formation of egg and sperm to get the best opportunity for optimal formation of the child. During pregnancy, in preparing for pregnancy, we want to encourage that the person seeks to maintain balance in the gunas and balance within the doshas. We're always encouraging our clients to do this, but during the preparing for conception phase, it becomes more important because any imbalance that's carried in the mother's body will translate into an imbalance in the egg and in all the other dhatus of the mother's body, and that can impact the pregnancy. We look at the father's body. Any imbalance that he's carrying may impact the quality of the sperm and carry that doshic imbalance into the sperm and into the offspring. So while we typically are advising our clients to look at balanced gunas and balancing the doshas, it becomes of paramount importance when someone's preparing for conception. As we look at the tastes that are involved, we consider the mother's prakriti, and we consider what will keep her balanced. So we know that someone who's vata prakriti wants to favor sweet and sour and salty tastes. And someone who is pitta prakriti wants to favor bitter, astringent, and pungent. So I said pungent. Bitter, astringent, and sweet tastes. And someone who is more kapha, it's going to be bitter, astringent, and pungent. It doesn't mean when I say that we want to favor those tastes and eliminate or avoid the others. Just that those tastes that balance the dosha would make up the greater part of the diet in order to assure that we're balancing that prakriti and setting the stage for the optimal development of the egg and of the sperm. Generally, we want to balance the doshas, the agni, and the malas meaning I want to have a regulated Agni because I want to limit the formation of Ama in the tissues. So I want to keep that Agni balanced. I want to make sure that the waste products are moving, the feces, the urine, and the sweat, so that I'm not holding toxicity in the body, but rather the body is constantly cleansing itself. It's recommended prior to conception that the woman begin taking prenatal vitamins. They have folate, which we find in prenatal vitamins, and it prevents birth defects. We can do that through the diet as well by including lentils and dals that are rich in folic acid. So if we're considering conception, or we're working with clients who are considering conception, by incorporating lentils and dals or prenatal vitamins prior to conception, we're assured they have enough of the folate in their body, so they're going to support optimal formation. When we look at vitamins, a food-based vitamin is preferred, and there are some recommendations here. The favorite at Joyful Belly is Garden of Life Prenatal. It's a once daily pill that's taken. Whole Foods also has food cultured prenatals. So it is important for a woman who is seeking pregnancy or has become pregnant to take a prenatal vitamin throughout the pregnancy. Our food doesn't necessarily have the mineral content and the vitamin content that we would like it to. It depends upon where it's grown and how ripe it was when it's picked and how it's prepared, and so many different factors come into play. The importance of adequate levels of vitamins and minerals is so vital at this time that it's recommended you take the prenatal vitamins. Even if you think my diet's got plenty of vitamins and minerals, this will assure that you have everything needed for fetal development. And then we come to Ama. Those of you that have me in class know I'm always on about Agni, Ama, Ojas. So we've regulated the Agni. We've brought the doshas back in line with dietary and lifestyle practices. And now that the Agni is regulated, we want to assure that there is no Ama that's being trapped in the dhatus. It is important for both the mother and the father to consider cleansing Ama from the system prior to conception. This could be a seasonal cleanse or a home panchakarma that they do in advance. It's typically best if it's done 3 to 6 months at least before conception. This allows the mother to have several menstrual cycles before conceiving. Also, once we've begun the cleansing process, so if we do the Khichdi fast and we're doing the oleation and the fomentation and we're doing all the cleansing practices to remove Ama from the system, once that's done, we have to restore the Agni. We have to assure that we are not continuing the process of moving Ama from the digestive system into the tissues. We always want to continue moving it away from the tissues and back out of the body. So we want to make sure that we've continued this process of cleansing for several months, because we're going to have to remove the Ama from each of the individual dhatu layers in order to assure that that egg and that sperm are Ama free, that none of the fluids traveling with the egg are going to carry Ama, and none of the fluids nor the sperm cell itself are going to carry Ama, because Ama blocks the body's ability to really do what it needs to do chemically in that cellular division and dividing into germ layers and all the work that's going to happen in embryological development. For both the mother and father before conception, it's best if they avoid any kind of drugs, alcohol, caffeine, foods that are hormone-laden or have been treated with hormones, or any foodstuffs or their packaging that might be hormone disruptors. This requires a degree of vigilance, one for recognizing and understanding what are the hormone disruptors. Now this, you can do an easy search, just look for hormone disruptors, and then you'll be frightened of your kitchen, because a number of our products are packaged in containers that have hormone disruptors, plastic, what's that called, BPA, which we find lining cans. So removing these substances from the house and not rebuying them is going to be really important. Alcohol, caffeine, and drugs can all alter the genetic makeup of the egg or the sperm. So they can interfere with good formation of egg and sperm. once we feel that we've regulated Agni, we've gone through the process of removing Ama, now we want to build Ojas in both parents. Remember, Ojas is the healthy end product of the formation of the Dhatus. So what this means is, once I've removed Ama from the tissues, I restore the vitality of each of those 7 tissue layers. And when I have done that, I get all the way down to the 7th tissue layer, and I've restored the vitality of the shukra, the egg and the sperm. And now I build strength in the mother and the father, vitality. We want to pay attention to the state of the mind, whether they're in a sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic state, the level of their spiritual health. When I think of a sattvic parent or a sattvic person, it's kind of the ideal and the goal, but it's not always attainable. The sattvic person is aware of their tendencies. They are self-aware of who they are and how they behave. But in addition to that, they are able to control those tendencies. So the sattvic vata individual is aware that they have a tendency to worry and fear. And they're able to, when they see worry and fear come up, to breathe and to trust in the process. The sattvic pitta person recognizes that they have a tendency to go to anger and judgment when they get frustrated or when obstacles arise. The sattvic person then also recognizes and breathes when the obstacles arise and look at it as opportunity for learning and an opportunity for growth rather than an opportunity to blame. And the sattvic kapha dosha person recognizes they have a tendency to be overly attached to the past and to be less likely to want to move forward. And when they recognize, when they see themselves, when something happens, an obstacle arises or a change occurs, rather than reverting to their history, they stay present, focused, breathe, and look for the benefit in the moment. So the sattvic individual is one who can recognize their tendencies and control those tendencies. Now the rajasic individual, and this is a much greater part of the population, it's like more and more of us are in this rajasic camp. This person is aware of their tendencies, but they're more often going, oh, I can't believe I did that again, right? That they see the tendency, they know they have the tendency, but they have not yet learned how to control the tendency. So the vata goes into that worry, fear, and anxiety, even though they know they're just creating it. The pitta goes into the anger and the resentment, even though they recognize it's a pattern and they wish they could stop. And the kapha goes into that lethargy and that attachment and that stillness, even though they know they'd be better off if they moved. So the rajasic mind is a little bit more unhappy, but it's most of us. Most of us are in the place of, oh yeah, I'm the one who's doing this and I'm going to change, starting tomorrow. The tamasic individual is one who is unaware of their tendencies. They still think that every one of their obstacles is happening because of some, malevolent hand that's putting things in its place. And so they're often caught up in the darker side of the doshas. Because they're unaware of their tendency, they feel a victim of fate, and they are unlikely to change their approaches. For working with parents or working with clients, it's really nice when we work with sattvic or rajasic people because they are self-aware. And even though the rajasic people struggle with the challenges that they face, they still have that self-awareness that they're creating it. Tamasic individuals are more likely to see things as fate. That's just the way it is. There was nothing I could have done differently. And that makes it a little bit more tricky. It's beneficial when both parents have good physical, mental, and spiritual health prior to conception. That's the ideal. As a practitioner, I can tell you that quite often you meet people who are surprised by their pregnancies. One of the things I should mention about clearing Ama, there's a book that I read called The Cure for All Diseases by Hulda Clark. And in it, she mentions, she has big, bold letters at the front, because it's a book about cleansing. And she says, if you are cleansing, use birth control. Because as soon as you start cleansing and removing Ama, now I'm talking about Ayurveda. So once you start cleansing and removing Ama, you are going to start seeing your body respond in the way it's supposed to respond to stimulation. And so a person might start removing AMA from receptor sites, and when they previously might have had difficulties conceiving, now they're going to start conceiving. The challenge with this is we don't want to conceive when we have the AMA moving. We want to conceive when we remove the AMA, so we have clean bodies to really set the stage for a good, clear pregnancy. So where it says, you want everybody to be in great health prior to it, you want them to be AMA-free so you can have that ideal pregnancy. That's not always the case as a practitioner. Quite often you have people come in that they say, oh, look, I'm pregnant. And so you can't cleanse at that time. And so you can work with the Agni, but you can't remove AMA during pregnancy because it's not a time for cleansing. So it's best if there is a planned pregnancy, if they can remove the AMA first and then seek out conception. Perfect health in the parents or in the offspring is very difficult to achieve. We don't want people to get so caught up in perfectionism that they aren't enjoying and living their lives. So we have the goal of having no AMA and having good Ojas and being sattvic, but we also want to have self-acceptance for the level that we're at, and we're always trying to improve, but we still accept ourselves for where we are. Conception then is a bit of a leap of faith and an expression of hope. If a person is prepared for conception, they are trusting. This is the leap of faith. They're trusting that it's going to be good, that it's going to result in a healthy offspring, that the pregnancy is going to be good, that both mother and child are going to do great at the end. And that requires faith. And there is nothing more hopeful, I think, than a newly pregnant family, because the child is full of potential. They haven't yet woken you at the night. They haven't thrown up on you or peed on you or all the wonderful things that infants do. You have the perfect child and they exist in the ethers. And there is this hope that I can manifest through this pregnancy, this dream child, this perfect child. We still love them when they're imperfect, but there's something very special about the child during pregnancy. So all of this is linked for the mother's fertility back to her menstrual cycle. So let's talk a little bit about the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle begins in what's called the follicular phase. The ovary is a series, or not a series, but a very high number of little tiny follicles, a little hole, a little opening, and inside each follicle is an immature egg. The follicular phase is the time in the woman's menstrual cycle when the egg inside the follicle is brought to maturity. From an Ayurvedic perspective, this is a building phase. You're building the quality of the egg, and you're also building dhatu all throughout the body. This is the first phase of the menstrual cycle. The building of the endometrium is going to begin when menstruation ends. Let me say first what the endometrium is. The uterus has a lining. The endometrium is the innermost lining of the uterus. Each month, that is rebuilt, and then if there's a pregnancy, it is a nest for the fertilized egg. If there is no pregnancy, it's going to be sloughed off. That's what menstruation is the sloughing off of the endometrium when no pregnancy has occurred. From Ayurvedic texts, this began at the end of menstruation. From a Western perspective, the follicular phase of the menstrual cycle begins on the first day of menstruation. So it's just a little bit different, and I'll talk about why that difference as well. The follicular phase goes then from the beginning of the menstrual cycle all the way through to ovulation. Ovulation is when the egg is released from the ovary. In the Western follicular phase, this would go from day 1 till day 13 or so. And it's the time when the woman is not yet fertile. There is no egg traveling, so she's not yet fertile. But the egg in the follicle is being brought to maturity. That's why they call it the follicular phase. What's happening in the body during this time is that inside the follicle, The cells in the lining of the follicular wall are releasing estrogen. Estrogen is a female hormone that triggers the growth and the maturation of the egg. But the other thing that estrogen is doing is preparing the woman for pregnancy. Each month during the follicular phase, your body begins the process to get ready for pregnancy. I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. Each month during that time, the body begins the process of preparing the body for pregnancy. Estrogen drives the formation, increases the dhatu formation of the rasa and of the rakta, of the mamsa, the meda, the asti, because it's getting the woman, it wants her to be perfectly ready. So if the egg implants, you've had a 2-week jump start on development of this pregnancy. You're ready for it. You have enough fluids. You have enough dhatu ready to sustain this pregnancy. So we think of estrogen, it's a building hormone. It builds the egg, brings the egg to maturity, but it also begins the process of building the dhatus. Because this is a building phase of this time of month, of the menstrual cycle, this is the kapha phase. Kapha often begins cycles. It sets the foundation for the development of cycles. Ovulation is the next phase, and this is a very short phase. Ovulation is the pitta phase because it transforms, the body gets a transformational aspect here. What we had was an egg, and the egg now is traveling, and during this phase, the ovulatory phase, is when fertilization is going to occur. Ovulation occurs in a moment, and the egg is fertile for 24 hours after ovulation. Although it says that the pitta phase lasts from days 13 to 18, the fertile phase is only 24 hours. Once ovulation occurs, if the egg is not fertilized within 24 hours, then pregnancy is not going to happen that month. So this phase, although it says it's days 13 to 18, there's just a little window. It could have ovulation may occur any of those days. This is the fertile phase of the cycle, and it's the only time when a woman can become pregnant. The estrogen peaks early, and progesterone is now on the rise. What does that mean? Inside the follicle, where those cells were producing estrogen, they kept producing estrogen throughout the entire first 2 weeks of the menstrual cycle. This accumulates high levels of estrogen in the body, and then at ovulation, when the egg is released, the estrogen levels are going to drop back off. Now what's going to happen at that follicle, it begins to produce progesterone, and progesterone is going to take us through the rest of the menstrual cycle. So we see this shift. First part of the cycle, estrogen is high, estrogen drops, ovulation occurs, progesterone is high, progesterone drops, menstruation occurs. It is possible to observe the signs that someone is fertile by looking at changes in the cervical mucus. So the vagina has many different types of discharge during the month. It's a mucous membrane, and so there are constantly fluids that may be moving out of this channel. There are certain fluids that are released along with the egg at ovulation, and these are referred to as cervical mucus. The cervical mucus discharge is different than discharge at other times of the month. It's a little bit more prevalent. There's a little bit more of it, and it tends to be clear. And as it looks like in the picture, they advise if you want to check this, you would take a little bit of that mucus between the fingers, and then you begin to separate them just about an inch apart. And what's different about the cervical mucus than discharge from other times of the month is it's sticky, and so it adheres together, and you get these attachment between the two fingers. It's a little bit more slippery as well. The purpose of this cervical mucus that's been released with the egg is to help the sperm swim to the egg. It gives them a direction because the ovulation has only occurred on one side. So those fluids that have traveled with the egg are going to kind of entice the sperm in that direction. but also it's a little bit slippery and it's going to make it easier for the sperm to travel. There's less, when there's dryness, it's hard to move. And so when it keeps things moist and slick, then things move more easily. Many types of natural family planning books will talk about assessing cervical mucus and being able to identify it. So you can find lots of information on that. There are other signs that a woman might look for to identify that she's fertile. Some women experience breast tenderness. That's an impact of estrogen. They might feel mild pelvic or lower abdominal pain. This would be indicators of ovulation. Not every woman feels these. There may be an increase in sex drive. Interestingly enough, when estrogen rises pre-ovulation, there's an increase in libido because that's the best time for fertilization to occur. So if she does, during that bump in estrogen, the libido comes up, then you have sex, and there'll be sperm in place at the time ovulation occurs, and there's the greatest possibility for fertilization at that time. There's also a bump in estrogen towards the end of the cycle, and so some women will experience that increase in libido again right before menstruation. So as we look at the signs that you know you are fertile, not everyone is self-aware and has that much body awareness to be able to really identify these. If you notice these, that's great. You can use them for natural family planning, but don't knock yourself if you don't recognize these, because sometimes these are very subtle symptoms. If you track your moon cycle, you may begin to notice them more readily. So if you're tracking your moon cycle and you see, oh, I'm about on day 13 or 14, oh, I've got some tenderness in the breast. Or, oh, I felt that pain. I wonder if that was ovulatory. If you track these things, you will become more self-aware and notice them. The only reason really why you don't notice them is because you haven't brought your attention to them. So you can do that if you choose to. If you're working on, like I said, natural family planning would be the most important reason to be doing this. After the ovulatory phase, within 24 hours of ovulation, we move into the luteal phase. This is the vata phase of the cycle, and it lasts following ovulation until menstruation. So I put like days 24, 28 here, but it's going to go as long as it has to. After ovulation, your body wants to prevent any sloughing off of the endometrium. The follicle that released the egg now becomes what's called the corpus luteum, the luteal body. And so that's why it's called the luteal phase. The follicle during the follicular phase has now become the luteum during the luteal phase. The follicle released estrogen. The luteum, the corpus luteum, releases progesterone. So a woman's cycle now shifts, her hormonal production now shifts from high estrogen into higher levels of progesterone. So what's progesterone do? Well, it blocks uterine contractions. It's going to support greater formation of the endometrium to make a really nice nest for that fertilized egg to implant in. And it prevents uterine contractions so that you can't slough this off before the egg has had the opportunity to implant. The body doesn't want to lose the egg, and progesterone makes sure that nothing's going to move yet. At the end of this luteal phase, progesterone peaks, and then it's going to drop. Now, I should say something here. If the egg is fertilized and the egg implants in the uterine wall, communication occurs between the egg and the ovary, and the body continues to produce progesterone. If, however, the egg did not get fertilized or, for whatever reason, did not implant in the uterine wall, then there can be no communication between the egg and the ovary. The progesterone then stops and the endometrium sloughs off. The body's going to reset. Every month, it's preparing for the body to get pregnant, and it wants to start each month with fresh tissue. At the end of the month, if no pregnancy has occurred, then they want to slough off the tissue that was not used that month. This stage has both Vata and Kapha. Kapha dosha is responsible for the production of tissue, and during this phase, the endometrium is thickening and moistening and becoming a lovely nest, and that's more Kapha. At the end of the cycle, if there has been no pregnancy, if there has been no implantation of the egg, then Vata is responsible for the apanavayu, the shedding of the menstruation, the shedding of the endometrium. So what this chart is showing us is the fluctuations that occur between estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen, here in red, gradually increases during that first week. The estrogen being produced then is being used at the follicle to bring an egg to maturity. The estrogen continues to rise, and it begins the process of preparing, kind of slightly increasing all the Dhatu Agni to prepare the body for this upcoming pregnancy. Ovulation occurs and estrogen levels drop. The egg is now on its way. The Dhatu Agni are now responding to the estrogen and building Dhatu, and now the body's ready for the second phase. So we have the ovulatory phase here. Now the other hormone we're concerned with is progesterone. What you'll notice is progesterone kind of flatlines all the way up until ovulation occurs. When ovulation occurs, the follicle becomes the corpus luteum and begins producing progesterone, 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 and now our progesterone levels come up. And remember that our progesterone levels are designed to reduce uterine contraction and to build endometrium. If pregnancy occurs, we're going to get that implantation somewhere around in here, around about day 21. If pregnancy occurs, then our progesterone levels will stay high. If no pregnancy occurs, our progesterone levels drop, and as soon as they reach a critical mass, a low critical mass, then the body sloughs off the endometrium, and that is menstruation. So when we're preparing for pregnancy, I'm going to say some more about menstrual cycle. We want to become kind of hyper aware of the menstrual cycle. We want to track it and see its regularity. We want to get familiar with when are we ovulating. We want to recognize kind of the switch between the follicular phase and ovulatory phase, luteal phase. We want to recognize the shifts in those hormones and what does that feel like in the body. The better balance we have in the Agnis, the less symptoms we suffer during that menstrual cycle. And so it's pretty much every month is a menstrual cycle. Menstruation occurs at the beginning, ovulation in the middle, and menstruation occurs again at the end. So what about women who are preparing for pregnancy, who are actively seeking and getting ready for preparing for pregnancy? We want to consider, as an Ayurvedic health counselor, making recommendations about their lifestyle. We'd like for them to have a stable life situation. They may want to discern whether or not to conceive. In the best case scenario, people have the time and approach their life with intention. We look at like having a stable life situation. It's best if we're planning to conceive, if we have created that stable life situation for ourselves, because that's where we're going to come from a state of balance. Because once the hormones come in, once the body starts shifting, we go into a state of flux. So as much as we've got the life stable ahead of time, the easier it is to transition through all these physical, mental, emotional, and hormonal changes. We want to take the time. We'd like this to be an intentional decision. We're discerning whether to conceive. Is this the right choice for us? Am I able to commit to this dharma? My son was born when I was in my 40s, and I often tell people that I was a much better parent in my 40s than I would have been in my 20s or my 30s. And actually in my 20s and 30s, I was pretty actively not wanting to have children. Then when it happened, it was a surprise, which was a wonderful surprise, a wonderful, wonderful surprise that I'm very happy it happened. But at the same time, it wasn't an intentional approach. And I see the benefit when people make that decision. They are more open to and willing to face some of the challenges that come up with pregnancy. It's best if the person has some degree of a dedication to that spiritual life or into taking on the dharma of parenting, which I look at as a spiritual life. If we participate in the creation, in this creation in a material way, we want to do all the things that are going to really set the stage for health. We want to do our best so the outcome is good. We want to recognize we're taking on the responsibility for another human life. From the womb to the tomb, right? It's going to be, we want to have that level of commitment for this life we're bringing in. They are not asking to be born. We are deciding that they will be born. And so we owe them a parent. We owe them that level of interaction and support so that as adults, they're able to put on the mantle and go out in the world and do good. At the same time, we kind of give up our control of the future. We don't know what the health of the child's going to be. We don't know what that child's going to be like or how that child's life is going to impact our own. We have the dream. We have that etheric, perfect child, never cries, never throws up, never sick. And then we have the reality of a child maybe who has special needs, or a child who has a personality that's different than our families, or a child who maybe I'm a Vata and he's a Pitta, and now I got to deal with that. How am I going to navigate that world? So we do have to be able to give up control of the future, but we don't give up control of our parenting. You know, we have to let go a little bit and trust and have faith that what's going to happen will be the best thing possible for all those involved. The responsibilities we have to the child, I often think of this because we have many people come from a very selfish standpoint. They're having a child for how it's going to impact their life. Because I want this child because I want somebody to love me. That's the worst possible scenario to bring a child in, because the child will not be that for the parent. Or if they do become that, it's not healthy for the child. A child puts limitations on our freedom. I often recommend to people when they're reaching like the 8th month of pregnancy, I say, you guys should just go out to dinner. Just say, hey, let's go to dinner, and just walk out the door. Or you should go say, let's go see a movie, and you should just go out the door. Because as soon as there's a baby in the picture, you say, let's go to dinner. Okay, let's gather all the supplies, or maybe let's see if we can find a sitter, or, you know, where are we going to go? And the child's going to be there, and there's disruption. And never again, for years and years, do you have that freedom of just being able to say, let's just go out the door. It takes years. And sometimes it takes forever, because you bond and you don't want it to be back to the way it was. The child may do unpredictable things you may disagree with. I'm going to change that. The child will do unpredictable things that you will disagree with. And this is very difficult for Pitta parents. It's very difficult for Pitta parents who want to create these boundaries and this perfection. And if they have a Pitta child, they're always going to be pushing against those boundaries. Or if you're very Vata, there are going to be things the kid does that are like, whoa, what was this? And now I've got fear and anxiety, not just for my own future, but for this future of the child. And I've seen with Kapha parents, their challenges, the kid keeps growing and changing. And I was so happy with that snuggly little infant. And now now you keep saying no, and you're walking away from me, and that hurts my Kapha sensibilities. So regardless of your doshic type, your child will do unpredictable things that you disagree with. And if you can take it as a life lesson, if you can take it as, okay, these are my tendencies to become attached, and I'm going to work to let go of my attachments. My tendency is to get anxious about this, I'm going to trust. My tendency is to want to control everything, I'm going to let go. So this gives you the opportunity to kind of turn the parenting not only into a dharma, but into a karma, and being able to unravel some of those tendencies and work opposite the tendencies we come in with. And what about sex when we're trying to conceive? We've regulated the Agni. We've gone through a panchakarma, time period where you weren't supposed to have sex, and now you've gotten back into having sex. Now you're getting ready to conceive. In order to increase the content of shukra, to increase ojas, the strength and concentration of sperm, which is shukra, the father would avoid ejaculation except for the times when the mother's in the fertile phase. At that time, they could have sex as much as possible. This means during that time, if they're not sure when ovulation is occurring, they could have sex during that whole day 8 to 13. No, that's ovulation. Sorry. So ovulation is going to be about day 14 to 18. So they could be having lots of sex at that time. Remember, for building dhatu, it's about 5 days per dhatu layer. So it takes about a month to build up high quality and high quantity shukra. So if the man is refraining from ejaculation between the ovulatory phases, it's going to be just about a month. And that's going to make sure that that ejaculate has a good high sperm count, which is going to increase the odds of fertilization. It will have plenty of time for the sperm to come to full maturity, have good motility, ability to move, and so again, going to increase the incidences of fertilization. If there's a female orgasm during sexual activity, that causes contraction, which draws the sperm up the vaginal canal and increases the likelihood of conception, but it is not necessary for a female orgasm to occur for pregnancy to occur. If the ejaculate, the nature of sex would have the ejaculate very close to the cervix, and so the contractions of the vaginal wall will not greatly affect the sperm that are right there up near the cervix and moving into the uterus. So the female orgasm, while beneficial because it improves a release of oxytocin and increases bonding with her partner, is not vital or necessary for pregnancy to occur. Now you get to the question. So pregnancy occurred, and it happened at the ovulatory cycle. So now you wait, because fertilization occurs, in the oviduct, and then the fertilized egg, which is now called a zygote, is going to be traveling through the oviduct. And during that week or so, you have no knowledge of it. You don't have any impact on it. You're not informing it with your choices. It doesn't care that you had a sundae for dinner, and it doesn't, it's not being fed. It's free floating at that time as it's doing its own cellular division, getting ready to implant in the wall. When it implants in the uterine wall, it begins communication with the body. That communication is in the form of a hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG. The pregnancy tests are testing for the presence of HCG. If a fertilized egg has implanted in the uterine wall, the body produces HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, in order for there to be communication between the egg and the ovary. This keeps the progesterone high. It's kind of like the Who's in Whoville. I am here, I am here, I am here. And the mother's body responds by producing progesterone. Nowadays, you can get a cheap pregnancy test at the dollar store to test for HCG. The other thing that's kind of exciting nowadays, that you can test up to 3 or 4 days even before you miss a period, because that implantation occurs a week before menstruation would have occurred. It used to be that you had to wait 2 weeks or more after the skipped period in order to test for levels of HCG, but these tests are amazing and they're $1 a piece. Crazy. The pulse changes when a woman conceives. So if she's been checking her pulse every day, she could watch and see, there was a shift. Usually that shift's going to occur between 7 and 9 days after ovulation. TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, calls this a slippery pulse. It's a bounding pulse that feels very full. So it's like boom, boom, boom. I always think, when I think of a thick blood or a pulse that's full, that if I was going to draw the pulse, I would want to use a wide marker. And it's going to have a lot of strength behind it, which we don't often find with a very wide pulse. This would be a Pitta Kapha pulse in Ayurveda. The bounding quality is more Pitta because there's more strength behind the contraction. The fullness is a characteristic of Kapha in the pulse. During the preconception time, because you're acting as if you're going to conceive, so you're preparing for the pregnancy, you'd want to have aphrodisiac foods, and Vajjikarana is the term for aphrodisiac foods and herbs. There is no one-size-fits-all aphrodisiac. Here are some examples of foods that have been used. Vajjikarans are a very interesting category. Some Vajjikarans improve libido. They make a person feel like they want to have sex. Some Vajjikarans strengthen the reproductive system to give you the highest quality sperm and egg. And some, as they said here, are going to help enhance fertility. Vata dosha needs to be warm and relaxed and nurtured. Vata dosha will have a tendency to reject fertilization. So when you take things like dates that have been soaked in ghee and saffron, it moistens the whole body, nourishes all the tissues, and feeds all the dhatus. Ashwagandha is an herb specific type of Vajjikaran, which enhances fertility, especially male fertility, and increases sperm count. Some other Vajjikarans, Pitta. Pitta needs pleasing, beautiful settings and sweet taste. This is what you're doing before conception. There are preconception diets that are mentioned in some Ayurvedic texts where the diet pleases all the senses and feeds the shukra. So if you had milk infused with rose petals, shatavari, and vidari. Vidari Kand is a type of wild yam that improves progesterone. Shatavari is a phytoestrogen. So these are helping kind of increase all the yummy hormones which are going to support pregnancy and support fertility. Kapha dosha, if there's more kapha, they want more fiery substances. They need to regulate that agni. They want the transformation to occur. Kapha can be a little bit dense. And so we want to have the fire helps them to break through that denseness and allow for the transformation to occur at the fertilized egg.